Cool. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the September 19th. I had to really quickly check there because I forgot. Product Analytics Group Sync. We can go ahead and get started with the Billboard review. I will share my screen and then we can do it. Cool. So, number of issues in open surrounding cost data, the usage limit. We'll talk more on that later. 16.4. Updating cube schemas to exclude anonymous users. I guess, yeah, I don't think that's started yet. We've just started the migration of those. So I think unless anyone believes we can discuss any of these, we can just move on to those with workflow labels. All right, cool. First issue is blocked, so we can move on there. We have handling unsafe changes in analytics dashboard. Jan, are you able to speak to this right now? Or are you?
Yeah, I
Yep.
can speak to this quickly. It's in progress. It's turned out to be a slightly larger change than I initially thought because not only it's not as simple as just resetting the dashboard to the initial object and like dropping the draft object, because grid stack still retains all the panels in the background. So I'm now working to figure out what the exact delta is or finding a way of resetting grid stack. It's a fun time,
Got
but
it.
it's not a blocker.
Okay. Is there any support you need in figuring out how to get that all going? Or
I might need to set up a pairing session with Rob if my brain cannot figure this out by the end of today.
sounds good.
Feel free. I know all about Control Delete, so we're good.
Awesome. And next issue is adding product analytics to the experiment feature list. Max, you have this one assigned to you. Anything you can speak to here?
Yep. So this was part two of a two-part issue, first of which was to move the experiment features for a namespace out of sort of an AI coupled environment, which is done and in production. And the next is to lay the groundwork to allow anyone to opt in to product analytics. At the moment, I'll be merging an MR that puts it behind that flag, but also behind a million other feature flags as well. So there'll be no functional difference, except that existing customers will need to turn on experimental features on their namespace. GitLab org already has it turned on, so there won't be any effect on that one. But if we've onboarded an external customer, they will need to enable it if they have not already done so. They can do that today if they want to.
Okay. I'm not familiar with the process to do so, but we may want to forward that to our external customer, which we've just enabled this week. Could you share information with James maybe?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I mean, the quick version is in the namespace settings, there's a experimental features toggle that they just need to toggle on. So an owner in their namespace needs to do that.
Got it. Cool. Awesome. I have the next one for customer facing infrastructure release. So we've gotten a lot of what we want done here, and I just clicked the link without opening a new tab, so that's cool. So we've made a lot of progress here. Namely, we've got all the security review approvals that we need to really launch this. At the same time, we're getting closer and closer to getting out to the infrastructure managed environments. Pierre has everything set up too. This is confident, but there's nothing detailed here that really is leaking anything other than just the fact that it handles red data, which if anything, is less of a severity given that we don't host red data anymore. But we continue to make progress. Pierre has the pre-environment set up, which is supposed to be kind of a reference architecture to staging and production. I guess this before it even gets to staging, actually. So we're going to verify that everything works there before we move on to staging and then eventually production. So we're getting closer and closer. At the same time, we need to figure out what runbooks we'll need, but I think that's really going to be, and I've been trying to like really get all the infrastructure topics kind of collected and organized, but that's really going to be dependent on logging and monitoring and understanding how to scale things or react to things based on what part of the stack is actually failing or having issues. So I'm not sure really what we can really do now. But basically, the more I think about it, the more I can speak to it in a later point. But all that to say is we've made good progress here. I'm trying to figure out how we can kind of close this because we've really already finished conducting the security review and we're serving production, albeit the last step is really to get into the infrastructure management production environment. So if anything, I've just answered my own question by explaining it. That'll be the last step. So thanks for listening to my TED Talk. Cool. I will go back to the build board. And we can continue down the list. So we've got updating the project analytics cluster settings field. So you've actually got the next two issues. Do you want to speak to any of these?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, they're currently in development. The second one I'll put for review today. It's almost done. Yeah.
Awesome. We've got removing the snowplow prefix schemas, which may not be blocked anymore. Rob, can you confirm?
Yeah, sorry. I just
No worries.
realized I hadn't signed that to myself, although I did assign the MR, I've just assigned myself. Both of those are currently blocked. Jan just merged the GitLab.com changes to enable the newly named schemas on .com. As soon as that's verified in production, these are no longer blocked. I've already got MRs ready to go for both the dev kit and analytics stack for the final phase of work, and then this can be closed off. So I suspect that we'll have this done probably very early next week because of Family and Friends Day on Friday.
Sounds good. Awesome. And then we've got actually 4 issues owned by Elwin. I'm just going to quickly check to see if there's any update here. Nope. And then improving dark mode, error states to the visualization selector, and a bug with still in progress on a GitLab UI MR. Error states to the visualization is in review and is also in review for editing and dashboard duplicates on the dashboard list, and changes made are lost. So it just moved into review yesterday, so good work there. And then as far as the last issue in review, Rob, you also have this one.
Yeah, this is still with Cube. I've not heard a word from them, although one of their team has assigned it to themselves, but nothing's come about. So if I don't hear anything by the end of the week, I'll start nudging next week to see if I could get some kind of traction. I'm asking the Slack channel as well.
Awesome. Thanks for pushing for action there. Cool. I've got an issue from Alan, who's no longer on the team, but he does want to make sure that this gets wrapped up. So I believe he's still looking to verify this to make sure that whatever service paying metrics we've set up at this point are starting to show up. And then Rob, you have the next 2 issues in verification.
Yeah, the first one, as I mentioned, is the GitLab repo change to start using new schemas. I'm just waiting for that to hit staging, etc., so I can start verifying it. And the line chart was a bug that Sam found, I believe. Yes, Sam Kerr, yes. Where we weren't defining the type on the y-axis, which is throwing errors on the visualization designer. So just fixing that small little bug. I'm waiting for it to deploy so I can test it.
Awesome. Cool. We don't have a bookmark for the past 3 syncs, so I'm just going to, I want to say, I think perhaps renaming the GraphQL types might have been where we kind of stopped, but maybe someone can correct me. Well, okay. Why don't we just do it this way? I can call out a couple of issues that we've closed recently that I think we can highlight. We've connected ClickHouse Cloud to the analytics stack. That's been good. We've got .com going, as well as every other ongoing project in production, as well as an external customer. So it'll be exciting to see how that goes. Related, once we're actually in the infrastructure management environment, that will also be pointed to the same ClickHouse instance. So that should all continue to work, but we may have to change some instance settings. But hopefully, I'm working with Pierre to come up with a migration plan, but hopefully should have minimal disruption, especially with the external customer. At least the data shouldn't be going anywhere different. I think that would also cover, yeah, I already covered .com as well. And then I'll just leave it to anyone that wants to call out any issues. I'll scroll slowly on the closed issues if they would like to call anything out as far as what's been completed.
One thing I'd call out is actually one of Elwin's further down. Use new CubeJS cast numeric option. Just as a highlight, the Renovate bot pinged me and Elwin on a new release of CubeJS. And when we were reviewing the changelog, we noticed that they've released a new cast numerics parameter, which Elwin then immediately went ahead to implement within our code base. And it basically now means that rather than returning strings for every value, it actually returns the right type for the data, which is far easier to handle and much nicer to use. So just a shout out for Renovate bot and also just for Elwin tackling it so quickly and getting it into our code base.
That's awesome. Yeah, I can see that now. It's showing in actual numbers. And props to Elwin for the bias for action there. And I'm glad we have Renovate bot, so we can pay attention to the new releases. So also great. I will continue to scroll for about 10 more seconds if anyone would like to call anything out. Otherwise, we can wrap up the board review. All right. Then I will set a bookmark so we don't forget. And we can continue with the rest of the agenda. All right, Max.
I was going to read off your screen. Hold on. That's fine. Let me... Firefox moved. There we go. So yeah, there's been a lot of discussion about how we're going to get usage data out of ClickHouse essentially and into GitLab. There's been a few conversations about it. So I'm currently working, me, Rob, and Halil are currently working on an MR for the configurator to pull out per project the number of events being stored on a monthly basis. That is taking longer than expected because I am not an accomplished Golang developer, but I'm learning a lot. So it's been interesting. So thank you for the two of you for helping, and Nico as well. It's now working. The thing I'm stuck on is writing tests, but that's a engineering problem and not a product problem. So the aim is that we'll create a GraphQL interface so that the front-end engineers can pull out per month how many events a project is using, and then by extension, how many events the namespaces projects are using. I've defined in the linked issue there a couple of potential GraphQL queries that could be used with a few ideas. So yeah, I wanted to open it up to what folks are thinking. There's a couple of assumptions I've made as well about how we're counting used data and the dates that we use for that. Yeah, that's it. I just wanted to open it up really.
Are there any specific topics you'd like to discuss in this call, or you just want to, as a call to action for everyone to review?
Please review it. I know I've just seen that Rob sort of responded to the bigger question that was open. And then I see James has already responded actually. The two big questions I had were, are we counting by data or by events stored? And are we able to assume that we will be billing on a calendar month basis as opposed to not?
Yes, the idea is that we're going to be billing based on some sort of event count and probably based on the calendar. We're still working out a lot of the logistics of that with Fulfillment Group. But for now, that aligns with how we do CI, or compute credits. So it makes sense to follow that same pattern. And it lets some other notes around flip-flopping the iterations to make it easier. For the MVC, really, it's how many events are you sending? Ideally, we can see it by project, but if we want to start just at the group level and then kind of force a click and wait to get to projects, for the MVC, that would be an okay user interaction, and then we can iterate from there.
To be honest, projects is easier to count than groups because each project contains its own data. So we just say each table, sorry. So we just say, give us the count of events in that table. Namespaces is potentially more complex because we're adding n number of projects together. So if a particular namespace, for example, had 1,000 projects using product analytics, which is not super likely, but if it were to happen, then obviously that's an exponentially, linearly more complex problem. But I can't imagine it's a problem we're going to hit, at least in the very short term.
Yeah, I mean, take a look at the mock that's there, and let's start with the easiest visualization or fastest visualization. I'll leave it to y'all to figure out which of those paths to take, and we'll start with that as the MVC, and we can iterate
Okay.
into a better user experience or a different graphical experience as we need to. I think table is probably the best there versus graph.
Okay, that's
From
fine.
a front end
I
perspective,
go on.
table and whatever visualization, it doesn't particularly matter. Once we got the data from a front end point of view, we just plumb that data into that visualization and produce the output. So either visualization doesn't make a difference. We just need to make sure that we get all the projects data, essentially, ideally in one go. We try to do it. If we try to do per project, or in a sense, if we have to make single individual API calls for each project, that would be a big bad. That'd be worse than groups when it comes to exponential performance issues. So if we can just make one API call which batches all the projects of a group and gives us that data for each project, then we can handle it. If we need to paginate, happy to work out how to paginate. Table would be the simplest solution for that, because we'd need to be a bit longer to try and figure out how do we paginate a graph.
Are you happy if you only had to make one GraphQL query, but the response was an array of projects? So, you know, you had
Yes.
potentially
Yeah.
10 to 15 numbers to add up. That would be fine.
Well, we don't need to add them up. We just need to plumb all the projects returned would just be the project with its usage over that time period, and we just plumb that data in to the graph. So we don't. The only time we need to add up is when we go to the group level, but that's the second iteration we've discussed, and we're not even considering that just yet. So yeah, having a big array of group or projects is absolutely fine.
Sweet, great. Okay, well, I'll write that down in the issue in the internal notes we've been having. But yeah, that sounds good to me.
Awesome, cool.
Great, that was all I had.
For any other questions, refer to the issue. Thanks, Max. James had a read-only point. I don't know if you want to verbalize that or if we should just move on.
Yeah, great work, everyone. Kudos, thank you. Two huge milestones this week. GitLab.com has product analytics dashboards. I know that was a big lift of infrastructure and just all of the work over the last year. And first external customer onboarded. Still waiting on events. They've got a little radio silent on us, but I'll keep poking and prodding and get some feedback from the customer on how things are working. I'll be sending a note out to what's happening in GitLab with some of the details there, and so expect to get some feedback in the analytics section channel over the course of the day.
Exciting stuff. Awesome. So the 16.5 planning issue has a bit more substance now. It's if you've been looking at the board view, it hasn't really particularly changed, but just to kind of help keep everything collected in the planning issue, I've gone ahead and added everything there, as well as a couple other topics that we were looking at. So at this point, the planning issue and the build board should be in sync, is what I'm trying to say. But I think, James, if you're still good with it, we can go over the kind of themes for the milestone and then go from there. I can try to regurgitate my thinking on infrastructure. But James, you can take it away first.
Yeah, let me find. So 16.5 planning issue had our, oh my goodness, there's a lot of issues. Our theme for this milestone is let customers onboard themselves. That aligns with our OKR of releasing product analytics as an open beta. That's one of the product objectives for the quarter, and it's definitely a stretch on the engineering side objective for the quarter. Some of the to-dos, I guess, or specific tasks there, making product analytics that opt in, that's manual onboarding. I know Max has already been starting to work on that. From front-end perspective, resolving any of those P2 usability or functionality bugs, I think that most of that list is already burned through as well, or being assigned. And then the big one, stress testing the cluster. And that's, I think we're well on our way there. Kudos to Dennis for getting ClickHouse Cloud set up, and nothing is on fire yet, as far as I know. I haven't heard about data center, problems. And then the last one here is a stretch goal around implementing the event rate limits. We need to think about as not just we onboard, but as we start to ramp this up and make it an opt-in process for the ultimate SaaS customers, How do we put some limits in place so that we don't impact the folks already on board, but prevent folks from abusing, whether intentional or not, the analytics stack? So there's an issue to define the usage limit. I've put some numbers in there to start the conversation. But those are going to be the big things to focus on and deliver within the milestone. I think we'll also start down that usage quota path discussion that we already had. I think we're well on our way there. And that'll be something we want to introduce during the beta. So customers can start to get a sense of how many events are they sending? Are they getting value out of those? And I think that the one that's not filled in here, but it is a pullover or a carryover from 16.4 is wrapping up the great work that's already happened on the dashboard designer. I think there's a couple of little things there, but it's close. Dennis, what did I miss from our conversation earlier today? To try to multitask too much.
I don't think you've missed anything. I was just thinking for usage limits. Oh, that's a tough one, especially with the events per second, because I guess, are we defining the bounds of usage limits for the beta to start, or just in general? And like, I guess, how do we?
It's just in general, and we don't necessarily need to publish them yet. You can get to that point, but this is again more discussion of what do you already see today? What do we think the stack can handle? Realistically, what should we expect from a good actor sending a number of events? And do we apply this at a cluster level or a customer level or an app ID level rather?
Yeah, that gets particularly interesting because that also places an emphasis potentially on usage quota. And I mean, it was a proposal and it was an idea, but I apologize for calling out a potential number for the an issue that is confidential. Yeah, the important thing is like we have to be able to put the controls in place, and for us to do that, we have to actually be able to measure it, which goes into logging and monitoring as well as usage quota, especially if we're trying to reconcile a number of events and then data as well. It gets a bit more complicated. But if anything, to your point, it's about defining it. So I would wager we have to do a little bit more information gathering before we have a better idea about that. Because I guess just initial impressions is if that doesn't make sense, I mean, that's quite substantial. That means you're hitting hundreds of millions of events, if not billions of events per day, if it's per second. So that's definitely sensible. I guess, yeah, I just have to think on that more. I guess related, the stack has been doing quite well to the point where I want to enable the entire GitLab.com instrumentation because the numbers just aren't adding up right now, and I'm trying to understand why. And the stack hasn't fallen over yet, though I do want to make some tweaks to the Kafka configuration just to kind of dive a little bit deeper into that. But I'm getting too deep into the details at this point, but you've covered everything thematically. Sorry.
No worries.
Cool.
So we're making great progress. Dennis and I were talking earlier today about how far ahead we are, that we're starting to focus on polished things, that maybe we should leave a little rough around the edges to get customer feedback on. So I mean, just great work, everyone, of seeing things, picking them up, thinking about the customer experience and trying to make it better even before we have those customers. So don't stop what you're doing. We'll just try to provide better direction to you of where the focus should be. But if you ever have questions about what to work on, please feel free to ask.
Definitely, and I think I have a good helping of agenda topics to kind of speak to both. But I had something about abbreviating numbers on the single stab, but we can go ahead and move on that because we're running a little bit out of time. The main thing I wanted to call out, and James was talking about it, so we were having a discussion, and I think it's if it's not, let's make it as obvious as we can now. Given the the delays we've had in getting out to experiment phase from an infrastructure and logistical point of view, because we've obviously fulfilled what we wanted to build from a feature development perspective months ago, given that we're now really polishing and adding things like error validation, saving changes properly, and being able to retry queries and things like that. So we're really definitely in that polish phase. I'm trying to be as transparent about what's floating around in terms of the infrastructure side of things. And I know a couple of people have reached out in terms of how they can help with that. So I initially started off this long agenda list about all the different topics that are flying around with infrastructure as potentially candidates that we could swarm on, but some of them aren't ready yet. And some of them really need some discussions I need with infrastructure to be like, I know what the solution looks like, but what can we do with the help that we have? And I can speak more to that there, but we don't have a dedicated SRE counterpart right now. And so I'm trying to figure out what our options are there. There are certain issues that I think we could potentially run with. So like getting the people running Project Runway aware of what we're doing and having them engage with us is one. Getting the cube store architecture working properly is another. And then we're already looking at usage quota as well. But take a look at that list of stuff, and if you think you can help or help run with the or help better define that, please feel free to reach out. Basically, we've unofficially launched an experiment phase. There's a infrastructure process to get us approved as far as like being officially an experiment phase. But I really want us to make sure that we can catch up from the infrastructure and kind of logistical side of things so that we know we're ready for beta. And I think a lot of that is what James has already called out in the themes for this milestone in terms of making sure we have the logging and monitoring, the visibility to make sure that we actually know that things are going well as making sure that we're stress testing, which is looking quite promising, to be honest. I think it's going to be more of instead of asking, is the stack going to fall over with something like .conf, it might be more of a question of like, how can we ensure it's got enough headroom, but is also running efficiently as possible, so that we're not over committing resources and causing it to scale inefficiently in other ways. But anyways, have a read through that. If there's anything there that you think you can help with, please reach out. It'll certainly be easier than it'll be a lot better if we can have more people engaged there. But to James' point, if there's any question on what to work on, please reach out. Cool. That was a lot of rambling. A couple of housekeeping items. I just wanted to see if anyone had any questions on what's changed. There have been a lot of developments with the analytics stack and the configurator. We did things like dropping Kafka table support. We added a new thing called Vector, which we touched on, and we support Click Out Cloud. So I know we've been like, yay, we're there. But just wanted to see if anyone had questions about like what's changed or anything like that. I know we've also had the discussion around making Vector the standard. But yeah. Cool. Other than that, the other topic I don't think I've touched on is that we will be getting a backfill for Alan. So if you have any referrals for backend engineers, I'm happy to receive them. I'm working with our recruiter to open up the backfill. I will say I'm looking for a backend engineer with some infrastructure experience, so we can lean on their experience to kind of help make more progress on some of these topics. But any backend engineer is also fine. So that concludes the demo segment of the meeting. We're at time, but does anyone have anything else they'd like to discuss? Awesome. Well, it's good to see everybody. Love the discussion today, and have a good rest of your week. Don't forget, Friday is Family and Friends Day. So have a good rest of your week.